As labor pains tore through my body during a blinding winter blizzard, the husband I spent my entire youth loving threw a freezing insult and walked out with his mistress. He thought rushing to my mother's gala would secure him a massive fortune, leaving me to die alone. He had no idea that the moment the door shut, he signed his own financial death warrant. His pathetic play was already resting firmly in my control. Hello and welcome back to the Violet Revenge Stories channel. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us with zero budget to operate and pay our hardworking staff. If you enjoy the story today, please consider supporting us with just $1 by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or clicking the PayPal link in the description and pinned comment so we can keep creating these stories for you. My name is Leah Gonzalez. The first contraction hit me like a runaway freight train crashing directly through my lower spine. I crumpled to the imported hardwood floor of our luxury Chicago penthouse, gasping for air that suddenly felt entirely too thick to breathe. Outside the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, a historic winter blizzard raged with terrifying violence. It was burying the city streets under feet of impenetrable white snow and howling with a ferocity that rattled the thick, soundproof glass of our apartment. The storm had completely paralyzed the entire city of Chicago, rendering all major roads impassable and trapping every citizen indoors. But the freezing tempest tearing through the sky outside was absolutely nothing compared to the suffocating ice radiating from the man standing just a few feet away from me in our living room. Another wave of agonizing, white-hot pain ripped through my abdomen, forcing a ragged, breathless scream from my throat. I clutched my heavily swollen belly, my vision blurring and swimming as I looked up from the floor at the man I had spent the last 5 years of my youth unconditionally loving and supporting. Marcus Thorne, my legally wedded husband, did not rush to my side. He did not drop to his knees to comfort me. He did not pull out his phone to urgently call for an ambulance. Instead, he stood tall in front of the ornate hallway mirror, meticulously adjusting the silk tie of his custom-tailored dark navy Italian suit. His reflection stared back at him with chilling indifference, not a single trace of panic, worry, or basic human empathy marring his handsome, chiseled features. He casually brushed a speck of imaginary dust off his wide lapel, completely and utterly ignoring my desperate, pained pleas for medical help. "Marcus, please," I choked out, the desperate words scraping painfully against my dry throat. "The baby is coming right now. We desperately need a doctor. Please, call an ambulance for me." He turned his head slightly, peering down at me and shooting me a look of pure, unadulterated disgust, as if my intense physical agony was merely an irritating, minor inconvenience ruining his perfectly planned evening schedule. He buttoned his expensive suit jacket with deliberate, agonizing slowness, his dark eyes entirely devoid of the warmth and love I once foolishly thought existed there. "Go alone! Stop the drama!" Marcus shouted, his cruel voice echoing sharply against the high vaulted ceilings of our luxury apartment. "I do not have a single minute for your pathetic, attention-seeking games tonight. Deal with it yourself." I stared at him, temporarily paralyzed by a profound psychological shock that momentarily eclipsed my excruciating physical pain. The sheer cruelty in his voice was a physical blow to my chest. He grabbed his expensive, heavy wool overcoat from the wooden coat rack, his calculating mind entirely focused on his ultimate destination. He was heading out into a deadly, blinding blizzard not to find help for his dying wife and unborn child, but to eagerly attend an exclusive, high-society winter gala hosted by my own wealthy mother, Victoria. I knew exactly what his sickening, greedy plan was. Marcus had spent the last 6 months meticulously laying the treacherous groundwork for this very night. He fully intended to use my name, falsely claiming to all the guests that I was peacefully resting at home, to manipulate my trusting mother into signing over the exclusive rights to a massive, multi-million-dollar family trust fund. He arrogantly thought my mother would hand over the absolute keys to the financial kingdom to her supposedly devoted son-in-law. Worse still, I knew he was not going to the event alone. He was brazenly planning to meet his young, greedy mistress, Clara, right outside the lobby of our building. He planned on draping her in expensive diamonds secretly bought with my hard-earned money and parading her at the prestigious event of my family, right under the nose of my mother. He genuinely believed he had finally won, that he could easily secure a colossal fortune while leaving me to bleed out and perish entirely alone on the freezing floor. The heavy, solid oak front door slammed shut behind him with a definitive, loud thud, vibrating deeply through the floorboards beneath my trembling hands. The metallic deadbolt clicked securely into place. He was completely gone. Total, suffocating silence descended upon the massive apartment, broken only by my own ragged, painful breathing and the relentless howling wind outside the windows. The physical agony of the intense labor threatened to pull my consciousness under into pure darkness. But as the sound of his leather dress shoes faded away down the long hallway, a completely different kind of sensation began to rise rapidly within me. It was not weak despair. It was not pathetic heartbreak. It was a cold, razor-sharp, and utterly terrifying clarity. Marcus Thorne thought I was just a weak, naive, dependent housewife who blindly worshipped the ground he walked on. He thought my entire pathetic life ended the exact second he selfishly walked out that front door. He had absolutely no idea that the very moment that heavy wooden door closed, he had just signed his own irreversible, catastrophic financial death warrant, gritting my teeth so hard my jaw ached against another earth-shattering, violent contraction. I dragged my heavy, exhausted body across the smooth wooden floor. Every single inch forward felt exactly like dragging my bare skin over broken, jagged glass. I finally reached the edge of the large, heavy mahogany dining table in the center of the room. With trembling, sweat-slicked fingers, I reached desperately underneath the thick wood, feeling blindly for the small, concealed electronic panel I had secretly and carefully installed over 8 months ago. My index finger finally found the cold, hard metal of the hidden, encrypted distress button. I pressed it down with all the remaining strength I possessed. I collapsed fully onto the floor, my breathing shallow and erratic, but a grim, victorious smile slowly touched the corners of my pale mouth. Marcus believed he had brilliantly outsmarted me, but his entire pathetic, predictable play was already resting firmly and permanently in the palm of my hand. Exactly 90 seconds later, the deafening, explosive sound of heavy machinery forcefully breaching the reinforced steel of my private elevator doors echoed violently through the quiet penthouse. The heavy barricade was dismantled with terrifying, military-grade efficiency. A tactical team of 6 highly trained, heavily armed private medical operatives immediately rushed into the living room, their dark tactical gear contrasting sharply with the pristine, bright white decor of my home. They were definitely not standard city paramedics responding to a generic call. They were an elite, specialized extraction unit from Vanguard Security Solutions. Target secured. Vital signs elevated but stable. The towering lead operative spoke sharply and clearly into his encrypted shoulder communications unit as 2 advanced medical experts immediately knelt down by my side. They expertly and swiftly assessed my critical condition, immediately administering a mild, entirely safe pain relief protocol through an intravenous line. They lifted my body onto a specialized, weather-resistant tactical transport stretcher with absolute, synchronized precision. They treated me not just as a fragile, pregnant patient, but with the utmost professional deference, strict obedience, and profound respect. Because what my foolish husband, Marcus Thorne, completely failed to realize in his arrogant, greedy delusion was that I was not merely the rich daughter of Victoria or his useless trophy wife. I was the silent, absolute owner and commanding supreme boss, standing firmly behind the massive international security and medical corporation currently saving my life. As the highly trained armed men swiftly wheeled me out into the heavily armored, private extraction vehicle waiting downstairs to brave the deadly blizzard, my mind shifted entirely away from the physical pain. I focused entirely on the lavish winter gala happening right now across the frozen city. The inescapable trap was flawlessly set. The hidden cameras were actively rolling, and my treacherous, cheating husband was proudly walking right into an absolute slaughterhouse of his own arrogant making. The heavy, reinforced tires of the armored extraction vehicle tore aggressively through the deep, mounting snowdrifts, descending rapidly down a concealed subterranean concrete ramp located right beneath the beating heart of the downtown financial district. We bypassed the standard, overwhelmed city hospitals entirely. My elite security team transported me directly to a high-tech, undisclosed underground medical compound built explicitly and exclusively for the world's most powerful elites. As the heavy steel blast doors sealed shut behind us, locking the howling winter storm outside, I was immediately wheeled into a sterile, blindingly white delivery suite. The contrast between the freezing, chaotic nightmare of my apartment and this hyper-efficient, climate-controlled sanctuary was staggering. A team of 8 specialized obstetricians and trauma surgeons, all of whom were directly on my private corporate payroll, surrounded my bed in an instant. A fresh wave of excruciating, bone-crushing pain tore through my pelvis, making me arch my back against the pristine hospital sheets. Yet, despite the physical torture of childbirth tearing my body apart, my mind remained as sharp and cold as a steel blade. I refused to let the agony dull my focus. "Report the current status," I commanded, my voice trembling from the intense pain but radiating absolute, unquestionable authority. My chief of intelligence, a tall man in a dark suit, stood at the foot of my medical bed holding an encrypted military-grade tablet. "The target has successfully entered the venue. Madam, the audio and high-definition visual feeds from the grand ballroom are fully operational and completely secure." "Excellent," I gasped, gripping the metal side rails of the bed so tightly my knuckles turned entirely white. "Ensure every single camera angle is locked onto him. Do not execute the financial lockdown protocol until I give the final, direct verbal command. Let him feel like a king for just a few more minutes." Miles above my underground bunker, completely insulated from the devastating, freezing tempest outside, the legendary Crystal Pavilion was overflowing with sickening extravagance and extreme wealth. Massive crystal chandeliers, easily the size of small vehicles, hung from the vaulted ceilings, casting a warm golden glow over the hundreds of billionaires, corrupt politicians, and vapid socialites mingling below. Waiters in flawless white tuxedos moved smoothly through the crowd, carrying heavy silver trays loaded with rare champagne that cost tens of thousands of dollars for a single bottle. Through the massive, towering oak double doors of the grand entrance hall, Marcus made his highly anticipated arrival. He absolutely did not look like a guilty man whose pregnant wife was currently fighting for her life. He looked exactly like an arrogant, conquering emperor returning from a victorious war. Clinging tightly and possessively to his left arm was his pathetic mistress, Clara. She was shamelessly flaunting a scandalously low-cut, crimson designer gown. Wrapped tightly around her pale neck was a blinding heavy diamond necklace. Looking at the live feed on the tablet, I recognized those specific diamonds instantly. That exact piece of jewelry was purchased using over $500,000 secretly drained from my personal business accounts barely 3 weeks ago. They strutted proudly across the polished, imported marble floor, eagerly soaking in the bright, flashing lights of the society photographers and the envious, hushed whispers of the elite crowd. Marcus puffed out his chest, completely and utterly delusional in his belief that he and his cheap mistress were the ultimate untouchable power couple of the entire evening. He aggressively and rudely pushed his way through the dense crowd of distinguished guests, making a direct, determined line for the elevated head table where my mother, Victoria, was elegantly holding court. Victoria was the undisputed, reigning queen of the city's high society. Tonight, she wore a breathtaking, custom emerald velvet gown, looking every inch the welcoming, benevolent, and generous family matriarch. However, entirely hidden beneath the soft, perfectly styled waves of her silver hair was a state-of-the-art micro-earpiece. This tiny device was feeding her a continuous, real-time audio stream directly from my delivery room. "Marcus, my incredibly dear boy," Victoria greeted him warmly as he approached the velvet table. She deliberately projected her voice so that the surrounding circle of wealthy investors could clearly hear her apparent, overflowing familial affection. She extended her hand gracefully, her face an absolute, flawless mask of genuine motherly concern. "Where on earth is my sweet, precious daughter? I fully expected she would be joining us tonight to celebrate and finalize the estate arrangements." Marcus offered a smooth, highly practiced, and entirely fake smile that made my stomach churn with pure disgust. "Victoria, it is absolutely wonderful to see you looking so beautiful tonight. Unfortunately, Leah is resting comfortably back at the penthouse. The winter storm is quite terrible, and her advanced pregnancy has made her incredibly fatigued this evening. She firmly insisted that I come alone to represent our family's interests and handle all the necessary, complex legalities on her behalf." "Oh, the poor, brave darling," Victoria sighed theatrically, placing a dramatic, comforting hand over her chest. Right at that exact second, through her hidden earpiece, she heard me let out a piercing, agonizing scream as another massive contraction hit my body. Yet, Victoria was a master manipulator. Her elegant, warm smile never wavered, flinched, or dropped for even a single fraction of a second. She simply patted Marcus gently on his arm. "Well, I am genuinely so relieved you are here to take charge. Marcus, we have an enormous amount of highly important business to discuss regarding the generational wealth transfer and the immediate future of the family empire," Victoria stated smoothly. Marcus practically salivated like a starving wild dog. His greedy dark eyes darted eagerly toward the thick premium leather binder resting securely on the center of the table. Victoria gestured gracefully to a senior corporate lawyer standing silently in the shadows to her right. The stoic lawyer stepped forward into the light, slowly opening the heavy leather binder to reveal thick stacks of densely typed, highly complex legal documents. "These are the absolute final authorizations required to completely transfer the controlling voting shares and the entirety of the liquid family trust funds directly into your sole, independent management," Victoria lied with a terrifyingly smooth, sugary sweetness. "My daughter already gave me her complete, enthusiastic verbal consent over the phone this morning. All I need is your official signature on the bottom of these 45 pages to make it legally binding before the midnight banking deadline." Marcus did not hesitate for a single heartbeat. He did not politely ask for a moment to read the dense fine print. He did not request to consult his own expensive legal counsel. Blinded completely by his overwhelming, toxic arrogance and the intoxicating, dizzying illusion of instantly securing hundreds of millions of dollars in untraceable cash, he aggressively snatched the heavy solid gold fountain pen directly from the lawyer's hand. "Of course, Victoria, I am ready to do absolutely anything necessary to secure our family's glorious, wealthy future," Marcus declared proudly and loudly, making sure Clara and the surrounding guests heard his commanding tone. With rapid, aggressive, and incredibly eager strokes, Marcus blindly signed his name on page after page after page. He firmly and gleefully believed he was legally inheriting an unstoppable, massive financial empire. He had absolutely no earthly clue that he was actually, voluntarily signing away every single personal asset, every hidden bank account, and every ounce of legal protection he ever possessed in his entire miserable life, with one final, earth-shattering push that felt like it tore my very soul from my physical body. The suffocating silence of the sterile operating room was abruptly pierced by a sound sweeter than any symphony. It was the sharp, furious, and incredibly loud cry of my newborn daughter. I collapsed back against the sweat-soaked hospital pillows, my chest heaving wildly as hot tears of absolute relief streamed down my exhausted face. The elite medical staff moved with blinding speed and practiced precision, gently swaddling my perfect, healthy baby girl in warm, soft blankets, before placing her carefully against my chest. For exactly 1 minute, I allowed myself to just be a mother, inhaling the sweet, pure scent of her skin, whispering soft promises of unbreakable protection into her tiny ear. But the moment my daughter was safely escorted to the adjoining, highly secured neonatal suite by my most trusted private pediatricians, the atmosphere inside my recovery room shifted instantly. The gentle, caring doctors respectfully backed away into the shadows. In their place, the highest-ranking executives of my global empire stepped forward into the harsh, bright fluorescent light, forming an impenetrable wall of dark suits and predatory intellect around my bed. I slowly pushed myself up into a seated position, completely ignoring the lingering, dull ache radiating through my lower abdomen. The physical weakness was entirely gone, replaced by a surging, electric wave of pure adrenaline and cold, calculated fury. For 5 long, agonizing years, I had deliberately forced myself to play the humiliating role of the meek, submissive, and financially dependent housewife. I had worn modest dresses, cooked his dinners, and smiled blankly while Marcus arrogantly paraded around, completely believing he was the sole provider and the undisputed master of our household. I had suffocated my own brilliant mind to feed his fragile, pathetic ego, letting him believe he was a titan of industry while I was just a beautiful, so quiet ornament. But that suffocating charade was officially dead. Sitting in that hospital bed, I completely shed the pathetic skin of Leah the housewife. I was finally breathing as my true self again, the ruthless, undisputed apex predator of the corporate financial world. My chief of intelligence stepped right to the edge of my bed, his face a mask of absolute stoicism. He did not offer empty congratulations on the birth. He simply handed me a thick, heavy black leather folder bearing the gold-embossed crest of Zenith Horizon Capital. "The final audit is completely finished, madam," he stated, his voice a low, serious rumble in the quiet room. "Over the past 48 hours, Marcus has successfully transferred exactly $12,500,000 from the corporate holding accounts into his private offshore shell companies located in the Cayman Islands. We have perfectly documented every single digital footprint, every forged signature, every fake vendor invoice, and every illegal wire transfer he authorized since last spring." I opened the folder, my eyes tracing the long, damning columns of stolen money and falsified tax records. A cold, wicked smile spread slowly across my face. Marcus genuinely believed he was an unstoppable financial genius. He thought he was brilliantly embezzling millions from Zenith Horizon Capital, a massive, faceless investment conglomerate that he arrogantly assumed was too bloated to notice a few missing drops in their vast ocean of wealth. The shocking, hilarious truth was that he had absolutely no idea who he was actually stealing from. Exactly 6 months ago, using a complex web of anonymous holding corporations and phantom buyers, I had secretly and entirely purchased Zenith Horizon Capital. I became the absolute owner and sole board director of the very company he was robbing blind. I had intentionally left the corporate vault doors wide open. I had deliberately fed his insatiable greed, silently watching from the shadows of my own home as he aggressively stole my money to fund his lavish lifestyle, lease his expensive sports cars, and shower his cheap mistress with diamonds. I let him dig his own grave so incredibly deep that he would never, ever be able to climb out. I wanted his crimes to cross over from petty theft into massive, federal corporate fraud. "The trap is completely full," I said, my voice dripping with icy satisfaction as I tossed the heavy folder onto the side metal table. I looked directly at my chief financial officer, a ruthless woman who held the digital keys to my entire empire. "Execute the absolute financial slaughter protocol right now. Freeze every single asset attached to his name, his social security number, or his known aliases. I want his joint checking accounts, his hidden offshore trust funds, his platinum credit cards, and his illegal black market crypto wallets completely locked down by the federal banking authorities. Drain his available daily transaction limits down to exactly $0.00. I want his net worth entirely obliterated before he even finishes his next glass of champagne." "It is already done, madam," the financial officer replied without a single second of hesitation, her fingers flying rapidly across her encrypted tablet to send the final, devastating kill codes to the international banking network. I turned my gaze toward the wall-mounted digital clock. It was almost midnight. It was finally time. I looked at the lead technical engineer standing silently by the reinforced steel door. Tap directly into the main audiovisual control system at the Crystal Pavilion, I ordered, my tone leaving absolutely no room for failure or delay. Bypass their local security firewalls and completely hijack the massive digital projector screen located directly behind the main speaker podium in the grand ballroom. Connect the high-definition surveillance camera in this hospital room straight to their live audio and visual feed. When Marcus steps up to that microphone to brag to the city about his new, stolen wealth, I want my face to be the very last thing he sees before his entire pathetic world burns to the ground. Get me a live connection right now. Connection established. Madam, you are live in 3, 2, 1, the engineer replied, pointing a steady finger toward the glowing green light of the camera. Back in the blindingly bright grand ballroom of the Crystal Pavilion, the lavish orchestra brought their classical symphony to a graceful conclusion. The heavy gold-plated microphone on the central elevated podium was deliberately adjusted by a silent stagehand. Marcus Thorne, overflowing with unearned confidence and toxic pride, confidently climbed the short carpeted steps to the stage. He stood before the sea of the wealthiest elites in the entire city, holding a crystal flute filled with $20,000 champagne. He tapped a solid silver spoon against the delicate glass. The sharp, clear ringing sound easily cut through the sophisticated chatter of the room, commanding the absolute attention of every single politician, celebrity, and corporate titan present. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, and beloved family, Marcus began, his voice dripping with a sickly sweet, manufactured charisma that echoed loudly through the state-of-the-art sound system. Tonight marks a monumental turning point as I step into this massive new leadership role, guiding the financial destiny of our incredible family empire. I want to raise a glass to the future, to boundless prosperity, undeniable success, and the beautiful woman standing by my side who has supported my grandest visions. He extended his arm, gesturing grandly toward Clara, who practically beamed under the spotlight in her scandalous crimson gown, entirely oblivious to the massive storm about to destroy them both. Marcus brought the crystal rim to his lips, utterly convinced he had just conquered the entire world. Suddenly, the towering, 2-story-high digital projection screen located directly behind the main podium let out a harsh, loud electronic screech. The soothing, ambient blue lighting of the ballroom abruptly plunged into pitch-black darkness. Panicked murmurs instantly rippled through the massive crowd. A second later, the giant screen flashed violently back to life, flooding the stage in an intense, glaring white light. Marcus lowered his glass, looking over his shoulder with deep annoyance, fully expecting to see a technical error or a ruined corporate slideshow. Instead, he saw my face. The camera angle was tightly focused, projecting my image at a massive scale that dominated the entire room. I was sitting upright in my sterile hospital bed, my dark hair pulled back severely, my skin pale from the intense physical trauma of giving birth just minutes prior. Yet, my eyes were burning with a terrifying, homicidal intensity that cut straight through the digital feed and pinned him exactly where he stood. The entire sprawling ballroom instantly plummeted into a deafening, terrifying, and absolute dead silence. You could have heard a single pin drop onto the imported marble floor. Hundreds of guests held their breath, their eyes darting wildly between the living, breathing Marcus on the stage and the gigantic, wrathful projection of his wife towering above him. "Good evening, Chicago!" My voice boomed through the massive surround sound speakers, the deep bass shaking the crystal glasses on the tables. The tone was completely flat, devoid of any warmth, carrying the chilling, lethal weight of an executioner reading a final sentence. I apologize for my physical absence at this wonderful celebration. As my loving husband so helpfully informed you all, I was simply entirely too tired to attend. Giving birth to a child entirely alone on a freezing hardwood floor while your husband walks out the door to meet his cheap mistress does tend to drain a woman of her energy. A collective, synchronized gasp violently ripped through the elite crowd. Heads whipped around to stare at Marcus, the smug, arrogant smirk was entirely wiped from his face, replaced by a sudden, sickening pale hue. He stood completely frozen, his mouth hanging slightly open like a dying fish, desperately trying to comprehend the impossible nightmare unfolding in front of him. "Marcus, you pathetic, delusional parasite," I continued, my voice echoing relentlessly. "You stood in our home tonight, watched me collapse in agonizing labor, and told me to stop the drama. You thought leaving me for dead would finally give you the ultimate freedom to steal my generational wealth. But you are incredibly stupid. I want you to look closely at the massive screen behind you." The visual feed smoothly split into two distinct panels. On the left side, my cold, unblinking face remained. On the right side, highly confidential, high-definition surveillance photographs and explicit text messages began to rapidly scroll for the entire city to witness. There were crystal-clear images of Marcus and Clara sneaking into cheap motels, their passionate, disgusting text exchanges detailing their explicit plans to drain my bank accounts, and receipts for the diamond necklace currently resting on Clara's neck, legally proving the jewelry was purchased with stolen corporate funds. "You thought you were a master manipulator," I stated, the volume of my voice rising slightly, echoing with pure, unfiltered venom. "You thought you successfully manipulated my mother into handing over the keys to the kingdom. You were entirely wrong. The 45 pages of dense legal documents you so eagerly and blindly signed just minutes ago were absolutely not trust fund transfer authorizations. They were legally binding, irrevocable declarations of absolute financial surrender. You just voluntarily signed away every single penny to your name, the deed to your luxury sports cars, your entire stock portfolio, and your personal freedom. You legally handed it all directly back to me." Marcus stumbled backward, dropping his expensive champagne glass. The crystal shattered violently into 1,000 tiny pieces against the wooden stage. He looked desperately down at the VIP table where Victoria was sitting. He expected to see her in shock, perhaps rushing to his defense against this crazy public attack. Instead, Victoria stood up slowly from her chair. The sweet, motherly facade she had worn all evening evaporated entirely, revealing the terrifying, cold-blooded matriarch who had built a billion-dollar empire from absolutely nothing. She calmly smoothed the front of her emerald velvet gown and walked deliberately up the short steps to the stage. Marcus reached out his trembling hands toward her. "Victoria, please, this is a massive misunderstanding. My wife is sick. She is hallucinating. You have to believe me." Victoria did not say a single word initially. She simply pulled her arm back and delivered a brutal, resounding, open-handed slap directly across his face. The sharp, cracking sound of the physical blow echoed through the microphone and reverberated across the silent ballroom like a gunshot. Marcus violently staggered to the side, clutching his rapidly reddening cheek, tears of sheer shock welling in his panicked eyes. "Do not ever speak her name with your filthy mouth again," Victoria hissed, her voice a deadly low growl that made the front row of billionaires physically flinch. "You genuinely thought you could outsmart us? My daughter and I have been coordinating this exact trap for over 6 months. Every smile I gave you, every dinner invitation, every single word of praise was carefully calculated bait. We watched you steal. We watched you cheat. We waited patiently until you walked right into the middle of the slaughterhouse." Down on the main floor, the absolute reality of the situation violently crashed down upon Clara. The crowd of wealthy socialites had instinctively stepped away from her, leaving her entirely isolated in the center of the room like a diseased animal. She looked wildly up at the stage, seeing the man she thought was her golden ticket reduced to a crying, humiliated, and utterly bankrupt shell. She realized with terrifying clarity that the diamonds on her neck were stolen evidence, and the massive fortune she had been promised was entirely non-existent. Without a single word of support or a backward glance at her ruined lover, Clara grabbed the heavy fabric of her crimson gown, turned roughly on her designer heels, and sprinted frantically out of the grand ballroom doors. She ran desperately away from the flashing cameras and the humiliating laughter of the elite crowd, abandoning Marcus to face his absolute destruction entirely alone. From the giant screen above, I watched my husband completely break. The show was far from over. Marcus violently shoved his hand into the inner pocket of his custom-tailored suit jacket, his fingers trembling so uncontrollably that he nearly dropped his solid platinum smartphone onto the wooden stage. His breathing was ragged, sounding exactly like a dying animal trapped in a steel snare, with frantic, uncoordinated swipes. He bypassed his lock screen and immediately opened his primary wealth management application. The small loading circle spun for 3 agonizing seconds. When the high-definition screen finally refreshed, all the blood completely drained from his face, leaving his skin looking like a reanimated corpse. Where there had once been a liquid cash balance of over $4 million just 1 hour ago, there was now only a stark, glaring red notification. The account balance read exactly $0.00. A secondary notification popped up directly below it, clearly stating the account was permanently frozen under federal mandate. No, 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 this is completely impossible, Marcus muttered frantically to himself, his voice cracking with pure, unadulterated hysteria. He desperately switched applications, logging into his heavily encrypted offshore portal connected to his secret shell companies in the Cayman Islands. He had illegally routed over $12 million into those specific vaults over the past 6 months. The screen loaded. 0 balance. He wildly checked his digital cryptocurrency wallets. Completely drained. He checked his platinum corporate credit line. The available credit was deep in the negative. In less than 60 seconds, his entire, carefully constructed financial empire had been completely vaporized into thin air. He was completely, unequivocally broke. Before Marcus could even process the absolute magnitude of his instantaneous bankruptcy, the massive, towering oak doors at the rear of the grand ballroom violently swung open, slamming loudly against the marble walls. The elegant string quartet, who had been sitting frozen in shock, hastily scrambled out of the way. A highly coordinated, elite squad of 8 massive security contractors marched directly down the center aisle. They were absolutely not wearing standard event security uniforms. They wore immaculate black suits bearing the gold crest of Zenith Horizon Capital. They ascended the stage steps with terrifying, military precision, completely ignoring the horrified gasps of the billionaire guests. 2 massive guards forcefully grabbed Marcus by his shoulders, pinning his arms strictly to his sides. "Hey, get your hands off me right now!" Marcus screamed, struggling pathetically against their iron grips. "I am the chief executive officer of this family. I will have you all fired immediately. You do not work for us anymore, Mr. Thorne," the lead security director stated with a cold, mechanical tone, without a single ounce of hesitation or polite protocol. The director stepped forward and forcefully ripped the $80,000 solid gold watch straight off the wrist of Marcus. The expensive metal clasp snapped under the brutal force. Next, the director reached into the tailored pockets of Marcus, violently extracting his leather wallet, his solid gold money clip, the electronic keys to his company-leased bulletproof sports car, and finally, the platinum smartphone he was still desperately clutching. "These physical assets are the legal, exclusive property of Zenith Horizon Capital," the director announced loudly, tossing the confiscated items into a heavy plastic evidence bag. "They were purchased using stolen corporate funds. You are hereby stripped of all executive privileges, effective immediately." Marcus stood there, physically restrained and stripped of his wealthy armor, hyperventilating in front of the most powerful people in the entire city. But the absolute nightmare was only just reaching its terrifying climax. From the very center of the elite crowd, a tall, severe-looking man wearing a standard-issue gray trench coat slowly stepped forward. He did not look like a wealthy investor. He looked like an apex predator who had finally cornered his bleeding prey. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a worn leather folding wallet, flipping it open to reveal a gleaming gold shield. "Marcus Thorne," the man said, his voice booming with absolute, unquestionable federal authority. "I am Special Agent Harrison with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes Division." Agent Harrison climbed the stairs, pulling a thick, rolled-up legal document from his pocket. He held the official federal arrest warrant high in the air for the entire ballroom to witness. You are currently under formal arrest for 7 counts of first-degree corporate fraud, 3 counts of international wire fraud, grand larceny, and massive corporate embezzlement, Harrison stated firmly, stepping right into the personal space of Marcus. Did you genuinely believe you were a financial genius, Thorne? Did you actually think you were brilliantly hiding your tracks? That massive trust fund you were so incredibly eager to inherit tonight was absolutely nothing but a federally monitored honeypot. It was a digital trap explicitly designed by my department and your brilliant wife to track every single illegal money laundering transaction you executed over the last 6 months. Every single dollar you stole was a tracking device leading us straight to your secret offshore vaults. The crushing, devastating reality finally hit Marcus like a speeding freight train. The luxury gala, the compliant mother-in-law, the incredibly easy corporate theft, the supposed trust fund inheritance. It was all a meticulously crafted, completely inescapable cage. He had arrogantly danced his way straight to the slaughterhouse. The legal penalty for stealing millions from a federally protected financial institution was a guaranteed sentence of up to 75 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. His legs completely gave out. Marcus collapsed heavily onto the hard wooden stage, his expensive suit wrinkling as he fell directly to his knees. The very last shred of his toxic pride shattered into a million pieces. He began to sob uncontrollably, loud, ugly, pathetic gasps echoing through the silent room. He crawled desperately across the stage, reaching his trembling, empty hands out toward the elegant hem of the emerald velvet gown worn by Victoria. "Victoria, I am begging you. Please," Marcus wailed, heavy tears streaming down his face, completely destroying his handsome facade. "I am family. I made a terrible mistake. Please, call your expensive lawyers. You have the absolute power to stop this right now. Do not let them take me to federal prison. I will do absolutely anything you want." Victoria looked down at him, her face a terrifying mask of absolute, freezing disdain. She did not take a single step back. She simply stared at him the exact same way one would look at a disgusting, diseased rat scurrying across a pristine floor. "You ceased being family the exact moment you abandoned my pregnant daughter on a freezing floor to die," Victoria replied, her voice dropping to a lethal, icy whisper that sent shivers down the spines of the surrounding guests. "I would not spend a single solitary penny to save your pathetic life. Enjoy your new concrete cage." Agent Harrison aggressively grabbed Marcus by the back of his expensive collar, forcefully hauling him back up to his feet. With a swift, practice motion, Harrison pulled a pair of heavy, solid steel handcuffs from his belt. The sharp, metallic click of the cuffs locking tightly around the wrists of Marcus signaled the absolute end of his life. As Marcus was violently dragged away from the podium by the federal agents, the massive wooden doors of the ballroom burst open once more. Dozens of aggressive, shouting investigative journalists and paparazzi, deliberately tipped off by my security team exactly 15 minutes prior, flooded into the grand hallway. The blinding, rapid-fire flashes of 50 camera lenses completely illuminated the hysterical, crying face of Marcus Thorne. He desperately tried to hide his face behind his cuffed hands, but the relentless photographers captured every single second of his pathetic, agonizing downfall. The arrogant king of the corporate world was being publicly dragged out like common, filthy garbage, entirely destroyed, utterly bankrupt, and completely alone. Several months had peacefully passed since that chaotic, violent night. The suffocating, freezing ice of the brutal Chicago winter had finally melted away, completely surrendering to the brilliant, blazing golden sunlight of a glorious summer. The entire city felt completely reborn, and so was I. Marcus Thorne, however, was living in an absolute, inescapable nightmare. Following a brutal, highly publicized federal trial, he had managed to secure a heavily restricted plea deal by completely cooperating and giving up all his criminal associates. It kept him out of a maximum security cell, but his financial and social devastation was absolute. He was utterly bankrupt, crushed completely beneath a staggering mountain of insurmountable legal debt and court-ordered corporate restitution. Stripped of his university degrees and completely blacklisted from every single financial institution on the planet, he was forced into the absolute lowest form of labor just to survive. He was now working a grueling, minimum wage, menial sanitation job, hauling rotting, foul-smelling garbage through the sweltering, unforgiving city alleys from dawn until dusk, just to afford a single, pathetic daily meal. On this particular scorching afternoon, Marcus stood next to a rusted, overflowing green dumpster, his cheap, sweat-soaked uniform clinging tightly to his exhausted, malnourished frame. In his filthy, trembling hands, he held a crumpled, heavily stamped legal document delivered to his cheap halfway house just hours prior. It was the absolute, final decree from the family court. The severe judge had shown absolutely zero mercy. The final ruling permanently and irrevocably stripped Marcus of every single parental right. It also strictly enforced a massive, lifelong restraining order, legally barring him from ever coming within 500 feet of me or my precious daughter ever again. He was officially, legally erased from our entire existence. As he stared blankly at the crushing legal paper, a low, powerful rumbling sound began to vibrate heavily through the cracked pavement of the dirty alleyway. Marcus slowly lifted his heavy, defeated head, wiping the dirty sweat from his brow. Gliding effortlessly down the sunlit, bustling main avenue, completely commanding the chaotic city traffic to halt, was a pristine, intimidating convoy of 5 heavily armored, sleek black luxury utility vehicles. Inside the massive, impenetrable central vehicle, the advanced climate control kept the air perfectly chilled and entirely fresh. I sat comfortably in the spacious, premium leather back seat, wearing an immaculate, sharp white designer power suit that radiated absolute, undisputed global authority. Nestled safely and peacefully in my arms was my beautiful, perfectly healthy baby girl, fast asleep and wearing a soft premium silk dress. I was absolutely no longer a hidden, quiet shadow in my own home. I was currently sitting at the absolute pinnacle of global financial power, the undisputed, reigning queen of a massive, untouchable corporate empire. As our luxury transport rolled deliberately and slowly past the dark entrance of the foul, shadowed alley, I gently pressed a silver button on the polished door panel. The dark, heavily tinted privacy glass slid down exactly halfway. The bright summer sunlight immediately illuminated my calm face. My cold, sharp eyes effortlessly pierced through the shadows and found the pathetic, broken man standing next to the piles of garbage. Marcus froze completely, dropping his heavy trash bag. His sunken, exhausted eyes widened in sheer, disbelieving agony as he clearly beheld the magnificent, untouchable, and incredibly wealthy life he had so foolishly thrown away. I did not shout. I did not gloat. I did not say a single word. I simply tilted my head slightly and allowed a slow, razor-sharp, and utterly freezing smile of absolute victory to curve my lips. I pressed the silver button again. The dark window smoothly glided back up, completely and permanently sealing him out of my glorious reality forever. The powerful engine roared like a wild beast, and the heavy convoy surged forward, disappearing rapidly down the sunlit avenue toward a beautiful, bright future, left entirely behind in the suffocating summer heat and the nauseating stench of the rotting garbage. Marcus Thorne collapsed heavily to his bruised knees. He dropped the final court documents directly into a filthy, stagnant puddle of muddy water. He buried his dirty face in his rough, trembling hands and let out a raw, agonizing, and entirely shattered scream that echoed uselessly off the damp brick walls. It was the utterly hopeless, broken sound of a man completely consumed by ultimate, suffocating regret, violently realizing he had personally, stupidly destroyed a magnificent, untouchable empire that could have been his forever. Thank you so incredibly much for taking the time to listen to my story today. Where in the world are you listening from right now? If you enjoyed this journey and want to truly support our creative team, please consider donating just one single dollar by scanning the PayPal QR code currently on your screen or by clicking the direct link in the description and pinned comment. Your generous support provides the crucial, necessary funds our hardworking staff desperately needs to feed their families and continue creating these wonderful, dramatic stories to serve you. Have a beautiful, safe, and wonderful day.